If you've ever hired a babysitter, given a coworker feedback, or helped welcome a new teammate, congratulations, you are already doing HR. You just didn't know it. Welcome to the Joy Powered Workspace podcast, where we help HR and business leaders embrace joy in the workplace. I'm Susan White, owner of Susan Tinder White Consulting, an HR consulting practice. With me is my dear friend, JoDee Curtis, owner of Purple Ink, a large-scale HR firm that I am also an executive collaborator with. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that might sound a little off-putting at first, HR for non-HR people. Don't worry, we're not going to overwhelm you with labor law information or bore you with health and welfare benefit considerations. Instead, think of this episode as HR 101 for everyday leaders, employees, and managers who want to do right by their people without having an HR title or being part of the organization's people team. Here's the truth. If you've ever hired a babysitter, given a coworker feedback, or helped welcome a new teammate, congratulations, you are already doing HR. You just didn't know it. Yeah,
That is so true, right?
right. Today, we'll break down the basics. What non HR folks should know about hiring and firing, onboarding, coaching, and keeping things fair and human at work. And of course, we're going to share our Joy Power tips all along the way. So grab your coffee, put on your unofficial HR hat, and let's get started. Let's first talk about hiring and firing. JoDee, let's start with a few statistics so that everybody has kind of some context.
So, as of August 2025, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that there were 7.2 million open jobs in the US. Interestingly, there is almost 7.6 million unemployed people in the US, the closest to a one-on-one match that we have seen in a very long time between the number of jobs open versus the number of employed in our country. Unfortunately, there is usually a great disparity between the talent competencies needed for the positions and the people available who have those skills.
It would be so easy if we could just take every unemployed person and match them with one of our open jobs, but we know
Right.
that's not real. Second stat, our September 2025 unemployment rate in the United States is 4.4%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics again, which, although slightly higher than it has been over the last few years, it is still historically challenging job market for our employers. 4.4% is relatively low.
Yeah. Yeah. And finding the right talent with the right skills in the right location at the right price is not easy. McKinsey and Company reported that only 56% of job offers extended to candidates are accepted,
Mm.
and 18% of new hires leave during their probationary period, which typically is within the first 6 months. So even when you think you found the right person to hire, they may not want to join your company and or they may not stay. So I think we can corroborate that story here at Purple Ink and that we've had many clients, many more than ever before, who in the past, say, 3 to 6 months have extended offers that were not accepted. So it took a few rounds of
Mm.
candidates to get the position actually filled.
I think I'm hearing the same thing that candidates are being much more selective. And unfortunately, employers are often having lower acceptance rates on offers than they anticipated.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the firing side, 1.7 million Americans were fired or laid off in August of 2025. And year to date, there's been 13.8 million people who have been involuntarily separated from their jobs in the United States. That just number seems overwhelming, doesn't it? W-
Yes.
We hear from our clients that firing someone is often the worst part of their roles as business leaders because they see how hard the impact is on the people that they're firing.
Right.
So let's do some practical hiring and firing tips for our listeners. We understand that it's challenging on both sides, hiring and firing. So, what are some things that we can do? So, before hiring, our first suggestion is be super clear on what skills are essential and which ones are nice to have. JoDee, have you ever had clients come to you with a job description and you read that job description and you think, whoa, that person can walk on water and carry their own buckets? I mean, I don't think there's a human being out here who could do that.
Right. We have. And even on top of that, looking at some job descriptions or job ads where you might think, oh, wow, this person is going to cost
Mm.
$200,000. And then they tell us the salary is 65,000, right? So,
Right. So we've got to make sure it's the essential functions of the job, right? And let's not try to get everything in the kitchen sink in who we hire. So, second tip we have on the hiring front, you really do need to understand the market rate of pay for the job you want to fill. And so, non HR folks, you're not looking at salary surveys all the time. You're not probably subscribing to industry compensation comparisons and whatnot. But there's things you can do. You certainly will have a pulse from the people that you're interviewing, how much money they're looking for. That's one data point. You certainly can go to glassdoor.com or indeed.com or anywhere else that people are reporting their salaries. And then also, it wouldn't hurt if you are part of an industry association to check and see if they're doing any data tracking on this front. You want to have a realistic idea of what it costs to get the talent that you need. And once you know how much it costs, that you think it costs to attract talent, you need to take a look at your own workforce. Business leaders, is it possible that you've got folks inside your organization who have been true and faithful servants to your business and you've not brought them along quickly enough? Compensation wise, so that if you hire somebody from the outside, you're actually going to have salary compression. You're going to end up having people earning less than that person that you brought in off the street. So before you make that offer, before you create that employee relations nightmare, take a look at your own salaries and decide maybe I need to make some adjustments before I do extend this offer to an external person at what I think market rate is. JoDee, I
Mhm.
bet you do a lot of consulting on this.
Yes. And we do a lot of consulting on it because people don't know those answers, right?
Mhm.
Or they're not really thinking. They're thinking about the one person they might be hiring and not their current employees and where they're at and what, especially with the transparency laws too, where you're required to publish a range for the position and then your own employees are seeing that information. So,
I think that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought up pay transparency. We know in some states, in some locales, it is law. Now, here where we broadcast from in Indiana, it is not the law. You don't have to post it. However, most employers are doing it because your postings may be going across state lines. You may want to attract talent from geographies where really viable candidates are. So, we've done a podcast on this before, but we're both in favor of honoring the pay transparency law whether you're required to or not.
right, right. Also, use structured interviews, right? That is, ask the same questions, have the same format for all candidates that you are interviewing for a position. This helps to avoid bias, whether unconscious or conscious. You know, you might see that someone was in the same sorority as you and start talking about that for a good part of the interview, and then you might find yourself more intrigued with that candidate because of the sorority they're in, as opposed to skills, experiences, and other things you're really looking for. So,
That's a great point. You could have a great interview with someone, but then you pay for it for the rest of that person's employment with you because you didn't
right,
really get to the skills and competencies needed. Yeah, that's
right.
great. And then our final tip on hiring is make sure that you recognize when you do bring someone in from the outside that they're not finished with the hiring process until they're truly onboarded and
Mm,
assimilated into your company. So I know we put a lot of energy into wooing candidates. They put a lot of energy in getting the job. Let's make sure when they show up that we spend a good amount of time, especially that first year, sharing with them our expectations and involving them in our company culture, doing regular check-ins, really helping them get immersed so that they feel welcomed and part of our team.
Right.
All right, so let's move on to some joy powered tips that we have about firing, which I know seems like an oxymoron, but there are ways that you can do firings or layoffs or discharges, I think, in a respectful way.
Yeah. The first step is to ensure that the process is fair, consistent, and well documented. Who is being let go, right? Is it departments? Is it skill sets? Is it levels? Make sure, again, that you're avoiding bias with individual people or with individual traits that are not consistent across the board.
We got the why of what we're doing. You want to document it. It just makes all the sense in the world. And then
Yeah.
when you're doing it, our second tip is you really do need to demonstrate empathy and humility. Recognize there's ownership, usually, if it's a performance issue, on both parts. Maybe the individual who you're letting go for being a poor performer, maybe we shouldn't have hired them in the first place for that job. Maybe we thought that they could do more than they could do. Maybe we didn't train, coach, mentor to the degree that person needed. Maybe we didn't have the time to do it. Who knows? But recognize that the person that you're letting go, especially in a performance situation, they're not the bad person. It just was a bad fit, right? I also think when it's layoffs and it's lots of people, that even it's even more important, I think, to remember that humility and that empathy, because most of the time, those individuals, by no fault of their own, are finding themselves sitting in the wrong chair at the wrong time. And so, how you, as that non HR manager or teammate, handles it can really make a difference.
Right. Also communicate honestly about reasons, right? At a broader scope is, our sales down or net income is down. And so you're being forced to make cutbacks for financial reasons. Or is it their individual performance? And have you had conversations with them and have you documented incidents on that? Or maybe you have hard data to show they're not meeting their sales quota. Be very clear to people with what is happening because without clarity, people make
Mm,
assumptions and it's best to just be honest.
so true. JoDee and I are both big believers that you offer transition help resources when you are exiting someone for the company from your company. We've done a prior podcast called Outplacement Outstanding. I think that it's worth going back and taking a listen to, helping people land on their feet, whether that was a good or bad experience they had with you, how they leave is going to be remembered. So if you can help them get a resume together, if you can help point them to new jobs, all of those things will be, I think, really help your employment brand and hopefully that person's feelings about you and your organization.
Yeah. And also think ahead about, if you have a formal workplace plan in place to think about what skills might you need later or what's upcoming or what new products or what new divisions or locations might you have so that you don't cut roles or people with specific skills you'll need down the road. You don't want to regret
Mm.
letting people go a month, 2 months, 6 months later.
So many organizations are thinking about, can I reskill this person? Can I repurpose
Yeah,
this role? And
yeah,
taking the time to do that, again, your employment brand will just really be strong, I think. Plus, you get people that you know their integrity, you know their work ethic, and then you spend time and money teaching them new skills. So,
yeah,
well, good luck
yeah,
on the hiring and firing. Certainly, if you have more questions, we love getting questions. And we, as you know, every episode we answer them. So feel free on hiring and firing to send in questions. So let's
mhm,
move on to what we think is a second core area for non HR people. And that really, I think, fundamental area is managing performance. HR
mhm,
often gets involved when there's an HR department, but assuming you don't have an HR department or there's nobody available to kind of guide you through it, we think there's some real simple things to keep in mind. The first one is you got to make sure that all of your employees have goals, that they have specific, measurable, achievable, reasonable, time based goals. the old SMART model, because it's really hard to manage performance if someone doesn't have a goal they need to achieve. For you
Mhm.
saying that they're not very good at something without them knowing how much of what did they need to do by when, it's going to be a very difficult circular conversation. So
Right.
make sure that as simple or as complicated as you think it needs to be, make sure every individual has goals that they're measured against. And then you have communication with them. When they're meeting them, you're praising them. And when they're not, you're talking about the consequences and how to keep them accountable.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes along with number 2, which is communicating the rules of the road. So not only having SMART goals established, but also just communicating expectations, right? Which I always say, I think clarity and communications is or clarity in setting expectations is the key to life, right?
Mm,
Whether it's your kids or your spouse or your employees, to say, if you want people to be on time for work, tell them what is on time, right? That is,
right.
we make assumptions, I think,
Mm,
sometimes that people that we say get to work on time. Well, what time is that? Is it 8 o'clock? Is it 8:15? Is it 9:30? Right? If we're telling our kids, to be home early versus 10 o'clock or whatever time, be very clear in all expectations. So,
That's great. It's why many companies will put together an employee handbook or kind of
yeah,
like work rules so
yeah,
that there aren't surprises. So I think that's an excellent one. The
yeah,
third one is you really need, for managing performance well, you are giving frequent feedback, good and bad. You're not micromanaging, you're not breathing down that employee's neck, but you are at least daily commenting on something that they're doing well, something you appreciate, something that maybe we want to approach that differently, but you've got to be doing frequent communication with your staff.
so important. So, and number 4, we talked about empathy in hiring above, but just being empathetic in working with people, right?
Mm,
So understanding they may have a different style or a different perspective. But that still means we have to hold them accountable, right? We
mhm,
have to say what we mean and we have to hold them accountable for being there. If we said be there at 8 o'clock and they're not, we need to have that conversation and reset expectations around it and make decisions if they're not coming in on time. So,
mhm. And I love what you said about, you've got to understand their styles, meet people where they are. The very best definition I ever heard was on an earlier podcast of ours with a guest. And they said that emotional intelligence is understanding our own emotions and managing them, understanding others' emotions and relating to them. So
yeah,
that's where I think empathy really is important for all of you leading teams and people.
yeah,
Well, our fifth suggestion here about managing performance is to think about having a disciplined process. And many of you have worked in large organizations. You probably know there's usually a three-step process. When somebody's doing something wrong, you coach them or give them a verbal warning. If it doesn't get better, you put them on a written warning. If it doesn't get better, you put them on a final written warning, or some organizations call it probation. And then if it still isn't good, you let them go. I would say, depending on the size of your organization, you'll figure out what is fair. And if it's a two-step process, three-step process, maybe a four-step, depending on your culture. But you want to make sure that it's no surprise to people, so that people understand that there's a progressive disciplinary process we have here, and here's what it looks like. Here's what it feels like. We don't want you surprised that getting a written warning, we want you to know that written warnings do exist. So be
yeah.
transparent about it and then to follow it consistently. That's going to be the best way to avoid risk into your organization.
And then documentation. I know many of you probably groaned out loud when you heard that word because people think of, oh, I have to document everything. It takes so much time. It's so much work. But it really isn't a big deal if we do it consistently. It's a big deal when we don't keep documentation
Mm,
and then we're trying to go back and document everything we knew about for the last month, right?
Uh-huh.
But even let's go back to my example about setting expectations of being at work at 8 o'clock, right? And if you observe someone walking in the door at 8:10 with a Starbucks coffee in their hand, I personally send myself an email, and
Uh-huh.
I would say, "Employee arrived, Starbucks in hand at 8:10 on this date." And then I transfer that into their employee file.
Uh-huh.
So keep it simple, just be consistent with it. And I know not all situations are that simple, but make it as simple and less cumbersome by doing it more often makes it
Yes.
less cumbersome. Also, too, though, don't forget to document the good, right?
Uh-huh.
So let's say the employee came in at 7:45 5 days in a row. Write that down too, right? As they took it to heart. Otherwise, 3 weeks from now, if you notice them racing through the door at 8:05 when maybe something major kept them from getting to work on time that day, you're not going to just document the times only when they were late.
That's great. I love that advice.
Mm.
Okay, so let's go to our third fundamental area for non HR managers that we think you want to have a handle on, and that is engaging and developing your team. If people have been put underneath your charge, you owe them the attention, the care, the feeding, the nurturing for their career. And so I think the very first thing that's important for all people leaders to do is to help each one of their members understand why their job matters. What is the value that they're bringing by the work that they're doing? I think it's important for them, if it's not, just obvious to them, that it's going to help them relate more to their work. They're going to align more with your mission if they understand their job really matters. And I also think it's important that they know their boss knows that their job really matters. So it's a
Yeah,
two-way win, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah. Number 2, learning what drives each individual. And this is sounds easy, but is not always easy if you're supervising, say, 20 people, right? And to
Yeah.
understand each individual. You won't be surprised that I suggest Clifton Strengths Assessment, because that's really what our strengths are, is what drives us in our work. But another way to do it is sit down and ask the person, what
Uh-huh.
drives you, right? Are you motivated by money? Are you motivated by time off? Are you motivated by challenging assignments, right? What is it that drives them that you can keep in your pocket, right? When you have a new project coming up or a new assignment. So,
Right. Then you could feed it, which is exactly what number three is. Provide the coaching, style, and resources that help each individual grow. And it will
yeah,
be different. And unfortunately, if you have 20 people reporting to you, you're going to be really, really busy because
right.
you do want to make sure that you're providing that kind of support that they need. And you need to take the time, as Jody just mentioned, to understand what it is.
Yeah. Number 4, hold supervisors accountable for recruiting their team members every day. Sometimes we get excited about bringing in new people to our teams or, replacing people that left, but don't forget about the people who have stuck with you, who have been there, and think about recruiting them so that you're not surprised when they announce they're leaving, right? Have conversations with them.
At a company that I used to work for, the managers and supervisors were held accountable for their turnover. And so it was part of their scorecard that they wanted to retain staff. Now, if there was a performance problem or undesired turnover, we could pull that out. But for good to great performers, it was the supervisor had to answer for the fact that they were not able to retain them. So I do think that can be something you think about. Managers who lose staff and they don't think it's a reflection on them are kidding themselves.
Yeah.
There's always a piece of it that the manager owns. So
Yeah.
the fifth idea we've got for this engaging and developing your team, make sure that there's multiple ways that employees can communicate up and out in your organization. So much of the effort that we do as supervisors and managers is making sure we're educating, communicating to our employees. Let's make sure that they have ample opportunity and they've had agency to speak up, to share their ideas, to let leadership know when they think that leadership is on the wrong track without some type of a punitive response. So figure out what can we do to make sure that employees are heard. Many organizations we work with do employee engagement surveys that are anonymous, so employees can do it that way. But many other organizations will also have like stay interviews that they conduct with employees about what keeps you here, what could we be doing differently. They have town halls where they absolutely encourage employees to ask questions, and the response of management is not defensive, it's welcoming. So think
Right.
about what can we do to make sure that there's really strong two-way communication happening everywhere.
Right. Number six, frequent, transparent leadership communication. And that's really where they can acknowledge realities. Maybe it's a tough economy for our product right now, or sales are up. So there's a lot of overtime, or sales are down. So we may have some layoffs, right? Admit mistakes, apologize, but also celebrate the achievement of goals and values too. And Susan, you just mentioned town halls can be a
Mhm.
way to do that. It can be
Sure.
video messaging, it can be emails, it can be an internal podcast, right? There's lots. And we encourage thinking about different mediums for those, right? To,
Keep it fresh. Yeah, I love that.
yeah,
Well, number 7 on our list about engaging and developing your team may surprise you, but we think it's not necessarily one, two, three, or four. That is thinking about, are you rewarding your employees financially to the degree they need? Are you providing uh, good compensation, good benefits, incentives, perks? Have you made this an attractive place to stay? And so it is important to look annually or maybe every couple of years, compare yourself. How are we doing against competitors? How are we doing in this market? What are our employees telling us? Do we need to up our game? So it's
yeah,
important. People, they may love you, but if you fall behind the curve in the total reward space, it's going to be very difficult for them to make that decision to stay.
yeah.
So, our fourth area and final area that we're going to put on all of you non HR managers is the legal area, staying compliant with the law. As employers, you have responsibilities, and you, as a non HR person, are probably thinking, what are they? How do we go about this? What ideas do you have, Jody?
Well, number one, if you don't have an experienced HR person at your organization, identify a labor law subject matter expert, right? And that might be someone internal or external, might be legal counsel, and have that person be your advisor. Don't wait to shop for one when you need it, right?
Mm,
When you get that demand letter or litigation charges or whatever else might happen, have someone available to assist you with those. And run your employee handbook and HR policies in front of them too, so that they keep up to date on your policies, but also that you're ensure your policies are up to date as well.
yeah, I think that's very smart. I'm a big fan of going to any local law firms, employment law
Yeah.
updates in the locations where you have employees working because
Yeah.
local laws, state laws are always changing. The federal space, you can pretty much, feel pretty comfortable because there's always a lot of news around it. You're paying attention for your primary workplace, but the state and local laws are forever being tweaked and changed and so on and so
Right.
forth. So I think it's important if there's law firms in the places where you've got people working, try to hook into any free offerings that they give.
Yeah. And those might be online too,
Yeah,
or
good
free
point.
webinars, or there's a lot of those available online for free or for very reduced fees as well. So, and think about subscribing to employment poster update services so you receive new posters as federal, state, and local laws change in all the locations where you have employees. So,
Mhm. And then finally, I would talk to any of your vendors who support any part of your people efforts. So if you have payroll vendor who's doing it for you externally, talk to them about if they provide services from a compliance standpoint. Any benefit organization, whoever you carry your benefits with, or your benefit broker, talk to them about who they might recommend. If you have an applicant tracking system, maybe there's also some consulting services that they can give you on compliance, your whoever runs your HRIS system, so on and so forth. There's usually a lot of people like JoDee and I that are in a lot of communities too, independent HR consultants who you might want to engage with. But don't wait until you have a problem, is our final point there. You want to make sure you stay in compliance. So talk to people, figure out what is going to be your line of defense to make sure you're doing things right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, JoDee, because we are talking about HR for non HR people, but we don't have a guest, I'm going to ask you our joy powered question. It's our
Okay.
tradition in all of our episodes to do that. So, JoDee, where have you seen non HR people find joy in getting involved in HR activities?
Well, I was thinking that you and I are probably the best example of that because neither one of us started our careers in
Hmm.
HR. So we were non HR people who started taking on more HR type roles or functions. For me, it was getting involved in recruiting was my first step. And I realized I loved that.
Mm.
But too, many of our client organizations, it does fall on if they don't have a separate HR department, it many times, for whatever reason, falls on the accounting team. I think because likely they're running payroll and maybe involved in the benefits. And so suddenly accounting people get more involved in HR. But I have found many people over the years. I have a friend who's an engineer who transitioned into HR because they were taking on so many HR tasks already. Anyway, even
Mhm.
a physician I know who was an active practice started taking on more administrative roles at the hospital and found himself not in an HR role, but being very involved in a lot of HR scenarios. So,
I
yeah,
think you're right. And I believe, and I've met so many HR people over my career, I believe if people really genuinely like people, and they get a chance to do some interviewing or they get a chance to help kind of work through an employee conflict and they come out on the other side of it stronger, that we get a lot of people who come into HR because they have really good business knowledge, but they really enjoy helping make people better, helping
right,
people realize their dreams. So I
right,
think it's joyful. So, listeners, some of you, I hope that you are loving the people involvement that you have in your work. And who knows? You may someday join us in the profession. But if not, hopefully after today, you feel like you've got some real good, simple ideas.
right. Well, now it's time for our listener question. Susan, one of our listeners asks, what advice do you have for someone who's trying to specialize in the HR field from being an HR generalist?
First of all, I think coming from a generalist background is ideal for any HR specialist role that you decide to go into. Your
Mhm.
wider perspective across the HR function is going to help you be a better specialist. You're going to be able to advise, I think, clients better because you've got the whole picture and not just a slice of it. I started as an HR generalist after I was in our branch world in banking. And it was great for me. I was focusing primarily on employment and employee relations and projects, which helped me when I ended up becoming like a comp specialist. So I got involved as a generalist with different lines of business. And as they had needs, I would need to go to specialists and say, here's what our issue is. And I get a chance to see and observe them working through issues. And it was just great, great, like on the job type of learning. When I eventually became an HRBP, having a generalist background was very attractive because I had had that wide breadth of knowledge. And so I think don't sell yourself short. I think that when opportunities come along in other organizations to be an HRBP or to be a HR manager of some kind, I would promote the fact that you've had your hands in lots of different parts of HR. I
Mhm.
guess, secondly, for advice on how to make that move, I recommend maybe studying and getting a specialty credential. If there's an area that's particularly attractive to you, let's say it's compensation, there's certainly compensation certification that's out there. SHRM also has classes on compensation. If you wanted to go into there's SHRM's workplace investigations specialty credential that's nice to have in the employee relations to be able to run investigations. There's also at local universities, they have a number of courses about different parts of HR. Go ahead and take those courses. Go ahead and get that some of the book work behind you. You're going to have a lot of practical experience, but with that, those credentials or having taken some courses, it might just make you a more attractive candidate for one of those specialist jobs. Jody, any other advice you might have?
Well, I think that was great advice. And I too actually spent the majority of my career as a generalist,
Mm,
even when I was, an HR director and a VP of HR. I still considered myself very much a generalist and really was not until after I started Purple Ink working. And I mean, I was doing everything
mm.
in HR, but really found my passion in training was something so that's what I do most of now. So just trying different things, figuring out what you like. And then I think your advice on getting certifications or additional education is wise.
That's great. One last thing I just thought of is maybe you volunteer to start something in your company that hasn't been done before. Maybe
Yeah.
you're reading HR journals or any of the blogs out there, and you hear about something. You know what? We've never done succession planning, for example. Let me work on pulling that together and standing it up. You're going to actually be able to get some real world experience doing something in a specialty area,
Yes.
talent management, for example, and that's going to serve you well as you look for other jobs that are more specialist related. So if it's
Yeah.
training that you love, like Jody, well, maybe there's a training program I could stand up here, I could deliver. It's going to get you real cred when you eventually interview for that training role. All right, Jody, it's time for In the News. An HRDive.com article on October 1st, 2025 was entitled Workers Are Avoiding Advancement. How can HR adjust when no one wants to lead?
Mm,
Yikes. This
yeah.
article was written by Carolyn Colvin and it caught our interest. Colvin uses a new term that I had not heard of called conscious unbossing. Conscious
Mm,
unbossing, right? I don't want to be the boss. This
yeah.
term reflects the growing trend, especially with Gen Zers, she says, that fewer people want to be supervisors of other people. She cited research from Express Employment Professionals that the majority of Gen Zers, those are people born between 1997 and 2012, would rather be an individual contributor. Supervisor roles can be viewed as potentially harmful to one's mental health and well being. There is stress with it, Jody, as you know. Managing other people does bring a layer of stress.
Yeah.
Does this surprise you, though?
Well, I do feel like I've been hearing it more and more. So I guess it doesn't.
Good.
But I never had that feeling at all that I didn't want to lead others. So it's
Uh,
very opposite of my own history, but I can see it, right? It gets more complicated when you're leading people for sure.
yes. And unlike you, like you, I did spend most of my career managing other people, really
Yeah.
from my early 20s until, my mid 50s. And I have to say, I am not sure that was the right route for me. I love, love, love being responsible just for me and not
Yeah.
worried about anybody else, their family, what's going to happen to them. It's very liberating and very freeing for me. So I can relate a little bit to the
Yeah.
unconscious unbossing. I didn't
Yeah.
think it was an option if I wanted to advance in my career, but maybe times have changed.
Yeah.
We have seen many people who were the best engineer or the best salesperson or the best whatever promoted to supervisors, hoping that whatever they were really good at would be instilled in the people who worked for them.
Hmm.
Often it doesn't work because they may not have the people leading skills that they need. They may not know that wonderful, wonderful engineer how to transfer their skills and abilities to the people underneath them.
Yeah.
I do think that conscious unbossing, can be really good. If people feel comfortable and confident, they can still ascend in their career without taking on others. And then if we can leave those jobs of bosses to people who really love to coach and to mentor and to develop, I think we'd have better workplaces.
Yeah.
So, some practical things that HR can do in reaction to this whole concept of conscious unbossing might be, first of all, be reasonable in what supervisors' expectations are. According to Colvin, if you can make sure that your supervisors are not going to be put under undue pressure and that we're really equipping the people who say yes to the boss assignment to be good at what they're at leading other people. You know, give them the coaching, the mentoring they need to be people leaders, and then really reward them for that supervisory path for taking on the responsibility of other people. Maybe by doing those things, we can get some of the people who are today consciously embossing to take a second look at opportunities.
Yeah. I think that is so important that we do both of those things. And I think people probably look up and see bad supervisors or managers and then think, I don't want to do that. But it's because a lot of times it may be because we haven't trained them, we haven't
Mhm.
supported them, we haven't given them tools. We've thought it was a nice bonus to make them in charge of people because of their good work,
Mhm.
and then we watch them fail to achieve
Yes.
success in that.
Yeah, and not only do they fail, the people underneath them generally fail because they didn't get good leadership. Yeah,
Right.
very
Right.
true. Well, very good food for thought.
Yeah.
If you're SHRM certified, you can get credit for listening to this episode. To get the code, go to getjoypowered.com/SHRM and fill out a short evaluation. When you finish the evaluation, you'll get the code and a link to a proof of participation certificate. The code will expire on January 12th, 2027. Again, that's getjoypowered.com/SHRM to get the code, and it's going to expire on January 12th, 2027. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your dedication to the HR profession.
Thanks for listening and make it a joy powered day.
Thank you. If you like the show, please tell a few friends about us and let us know what you thought by leaving us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening right now. Become a Joy Powered member to get extras like early access to episodes, video versions of the episodes, bonus episodes, and even more. Learn more at patreon.com/joypowered. You spell Patreon, Patreon. So it's patreon.com/joypowered. You can find more information on our podcast, books, blogs, and more at getjoypowered.com. We're at Joy Powered on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can email us via joypowered@gmail.com. Make it a joy-powered day.